The credit monitoring alert hit my phone at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. New credit inquiry, Capital One, $15,000 credit limit approved. I was wide awake instantly. I hadn't applied for any credit, and as a senior credit analyst at TransUnion, I knew exactly what unauthorized credit inquiries meant. Someone was using my identity to commit fraud. My name is Kevin Rodriguez, 38 years old, and I've spent 12 years working in credit fraud detection and risk analysis. My job involves identifying patterns of identity theft and credit abuse, so I recognize the warning signs better than most people. What I didn't expect was to discover that the person systematically stealing my identity was sleeping in the bed next to me. I slipped out of bed quietly and went to my home office to check my credit reports. What I found made my stomach drop. Over the past 6 months, someone had opened 5 different credit accounts using my social security number, 2 credit cards, a personal loan, a retail financing account, and now this new Capital One card. The total available credit was $31,400, and according to the transaction histories, most of it had already been used. I pulled up the detailed application information for each account. The addresses were all correct. My home address and previous addresses. The employment information matched my job at TransUnion. Even the income figures were accurate to within a few $1,000s of my actual salary. But the phone number listed for contact was one I didn't recognize. The most chilling discovery was that whoever had applied for this credit knew intimate details about my financial history that would only be available to someone with access to my personal documents. I spent the next hour documenting everything: application dates, account numbers, credit limits, transaction patterns. As I analyzed the data with my professional training, several patterns emerged that pointed to this being an inside job. The fraudulent applications had been submitted during business hours when I was at work. The timeline suggested careful planning rather than opportunistic theft. Most importantly, the person had used information that wasn't available through typical identity theft methods. They'd known my exact salary, my previous employer details, and even my mother's maiden name. Someone with physical access to my personal documents had been systematically applying for credit in my name. I checked the phone number listed on the applications. It was registered to a prepaid phone service, but the activation location was tracked to a store less than 2 miles from our house. At 3:30 a.m., I called the TransUnion fraud hotline and spoke with my colleague Sarah Mitchell, who handled night shift security incidents. "Kevin, what are you calling about at this hour?" "Sarah, I need to report identity theft on my own. Someone's been opening accounts in my name for months." "Jesus, Kevin, how much exposure are we talking about?" $31,400 in fraudulent credit, with evidence suggesting this is ongoing. "Do you have any idea who might have access to your personal information?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Can you help me trace the application sources and timing patterns?" "Of course. Send me what you have and I'll run a full fraud analysis." Over the next few hours, Sarah and I built a comprehensive timeline of the fraudulent activities. What we discovered was a sophisticated identity theft operation that had been carefully planned and executed. The first application had been submitted exactly 1 week after my wife Monica had asked to borrow my social security card to update some insurance paperwork. I'd given it to her without thinking twice. We'd been married for 4 years and sharing financial documents was normal for us. But Monica had kept the card for 3 days before returning it, claiming the insurance company needed extra time to process the change. The pattern of applications showed intimate knowledge of my work schedule. Every fraudulent application had been submitted during hours when I was guaranteed to be in the office and unreachable by phone for verification call. More damning, the spending patterns on the fraudulent accounts correlated perfectly with Monica's recent behavior changes. 3 months ago, Monica had started making expensive purchases that she claimed were funded by a freelance consulting project she'd never mentioned before. Monica worked as an administrative assistant at a local law firm, making about $35,000 annually. But recently she'd been buying designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and had even purchased a new car that cost more than her annual salary. When I'd asked about the sudden influx of money, She'd explained that she'd been doing business consulting for a client who preferred to pay in cash for confidentiality reasons. I'd been suspicious of the explanation, but I'd assumed Monica might be having an affair with a wealthy client. Not that she was funding her lifestyle by stealing my identity. I cross-referenced the transaction dates on the fraudulent accounts with Monica's recent purchase. The correlation was nearly perfect. Every major purchase Monica had made aligned with cash advances or purchases on the accounts opened in my name. The new car had been purchased 2 days after a $12,000 cash advance on the personal loan. Her jewelry purchases matched exactly with transactions on the retail financing account. Even her recent vacation to visit her sister in California had been paid for with the fraudulent credit cards. By 6 a.m. I had compiled enough evidence to prove that Monica had been systematically stealing my identity to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford on her actual income. When Monica woke up at 7:30, I was sitting at the kitchen table with printed copies of all the fraudulent accounts and a timeline showing how they correlated with her spending. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, apparently unaware that her world was about to collapse. "You're up early. Monica, we need to discuss your consulting income. What about it?" I slid the printed account statements across the table. "These are credit accounts that were opened using my social security number over the past 6 months. The spending on these accounts matches exactly with your recent purchases." Monica's face went white as she looked at the documents. "Kevin, I don't know what this is." "Monica, I work in credit fraud detection. I know exactly what this is. And I know exactly how to prove who did. Are you accusing me of identity theft?" "I'm not accusing you. I'm showing you the evidence that proves you've been committing identity theft." She picked up one of the account statements and stared at it. "Kevin, someone must have stolen both of our identity." "Monica, the phone number on these applications leads to a prepaid phone that was purchased 2 miles from our house. The timing of the applications correlates with when you borrowed my social security card. The spending correlates perfectly with your recent purchases. That's all circumstantial. Actually, it's not." I opened my laptop and showed her the fraud analysis Sarah had completed. The IP addresses for the online applications trace back to our home internet connection. The applications were submitted from this house, using this computer. Monica stared at the screen, realizing that her technical footprints had been thoroughly documented. "Kevin, I can explain. I'm listening. I got into financial trouble a few months ago. Credit card debt from before we got married that I'd been hiding from you. The collectors were threatening to garnish my wages and I panicked. So you decided to steal my identity instead of talking to me about it. I thought I could handle it quietly and pay everything back before you found out. Monica, you've committed 31,000. Even if you could pay it back, you've destroyed my credit rating and created a criminal record in my name." "Your credit rating?" I showed her my credit report. "My credit score has dropped 180 points because of the debt you've created in my name. I have late payments and overutilization showing on accounts I never opened." "Kevin, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." "Monica, this didn't just happen. You've been systematically planning and executing identity theft for 6 months. This is a federal crime. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to report this to the authorities and work to restore my credit. The question is whether you're going to cooperate with that process or force me to treat you like any other identity thief." Monica broke down crying. "Kevin, please don't send me to prison. I'll do anything to make this right." "Making this right means admitting what you did, helping me document all the fraud, and taking responsibility for the financial damage you've caused." Over the next week, Monica provided complete cooperation in documenting the extent of her identity theft. She'd used my information to open 7 different accounts, not just the 5 I'd initially discovered. The total fraudulent credit was actually $43,200, and she'd spent nearly all of it. Monica's original debt problems had been much more severe than she'd initially admitted. She owed $18,000 in credit card debt from college and previous relationships, plus $7,000 in unpaid medical bills from a surgery she'd had before we met. Instead of talking to me about her financial problems, she decided that using my good credit to solve her debt crisis was a better solution. "Kevin," she said during one of our documentation sessions, "I know you'll probably never forgive me, but I want you to understand that I never intended to hurt you." "Monica, identity theft is inherently harmful to the victim. You can't steal someone's financial identity and claim you didn't intend to hurt them. I thought I could pay everything back before you found out. Even if you could have paid it back, you would have destroyed my credit history and created legal liability for me. This was never a victimless crime. I filed a police report and worked with federal prosecutors to document Monica's crimes. Because of her cooperation and the fact that she was a first-time offender, she was offered a plea agreement that included restitution, probation and community service rather than prison time. But the marriage was over. "Kevin," Monica said during our last conversation before she moved out, "is there any chance we could work through this?" "Monica, you spent 6 months lying to me while systematically stealing my identity. Even if I could forgive the financial crimes, I can't rebuild a marriage with someone who chose deception over communication when she was in trouble. I was scared and desperate. You were scared to tell me about $25,000 in debt. So instead you committed 43. That's not desperation, that's poor judgment on a massive scale. Today, 18 months later, I've restored my credit rating and recovered most of the financial losses through the restitution process. Monica completed her probation and has been working to rebuild her life. According to mutual friends, she's learned valuable lessons about financial responsibility and honest communication. The experience taught me important lessons about financial security in relationships. Even when you trust someone completely, it's important to monitor your credit reports and maintain awareness of your financial accounts. But the most important lesson was about the difference between financial problems and financial crime. Monica's original debt problems were manageable challenges that we could have addressed together. Her decision to solve those problems through identity theft turned manageable challenges into federal crime. Sometimes the person closest to you is the one most capable of destroying your financial life, precisely because they have access to the information needed to commit sophisticated fraud. Monica's fatal mistake wasn't just targeting someone who worked in credit fraud detection. Her mistake was choosing criminal behavior over honest communication, and underestimating how thoroughly that behavior could be documented and proven. The $31,400 she stole was recovered. The trust she destroyed couldn't.